Today on the Modern Motherhood Podcast from AllMomDoes, I'm your host, Julie Lyles Carr. He had everything. It was all heading in the right direction. An incredible career in music as a producer and manager, 3 little girls at home that he adored, a marriage. And then came the day when it came crashing down. He never expected to find himself as a single dad, and that's exactly what happened. You're going to really want to hear about the insights, the wisdom, the challenge, and the journey that Robert Beeson tells us about, and how he's turned his experience into some incredible advice and tools for other parents who are facing the same kind of journey. Robert, thanks so much for being with us.
I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
So you have spent quite a season as a single dad of 3 girls. So give us the backstory on how you found yourself in that situation in a season of life.
So I had been in the music business for a long time and had a really good career going, but I had made some decisions in my life that were not the best for our marriage. And there were no big moral failures, but certainly I was driven by ambition, and so I was really invested in the company. And so that didn't foster good things in the relationship. And ultimately, my wife had made some choices in our marriage as well that were destructive. And eventually, her vices got the best of her, and she decided to leave me and the 3 girls. And so my daughters were 9, 7, and 4. And I remember when the morning she walked out, it was a spring morning, and I came downstairs, and the door to the room that she was staying in, because I moved upstairs, was open, and it was usually closed in the morning. And I just remember that moment where, okay, everything is different. And it was just like the air got sucked out of the room. And I just knew, even though we had been experiencing problems in our marriage, that this was it. This was that time where a new normal was setting in. And I also knew that within moments, my daughters would be running downstairs and saying, "Where's mommy?" And so a whole new chapter started in my life.
In that moment, how did you choose to interact with the girls and break this to them? Because I think for parents who are going through marital challenge, it's hard to know what the script is supposed to be in being honest with your kids and at the same time trying to minimize trauma.
It's very difficult because some of the things that we had dealt with as a family when my wife lived at home had to do with active addiction, some pretty extreme active addiction. I had typically hid things, made excuses, like kind of covered things up. But I knew, and I don't know how I knew, there was just something significant about the moment. I knew that I couldn't do that anymore. I knew that I couldn't just kind of say, "Yeah, mom will be back in half an hour. Hopefully she'll be back soon." I just knew that this had to be a real conversation. And so I gathered myself, and I was pretty strategic. I think one of the things that's important when you're in this situation, that looking back, I can only say it was a God thing, because I did first say, "God, please give me your words." But I think the important thing technically is to not be reactive, but to be proactive in talking about the things that still remain. I remember saying to the girls, "Look, girls, your mom is gone. I'm not sure where she is. I'm pretty sure she's safe, but we've been going through some problems, and you've seen more than you should have seen. And so I don't know when or if she's coming back, but this is what I do know, is that I'm not going anywhere. We're going to be okay. And I suspect this will be difficult, but we'll get through this. And with God's help, we'll just take the next step at a time, and we'll have each other, because you just need to hear that I will never, ever leave." And so I think that's what I mean by being proactive. Yes, address the things that are difficult. I don't know that you need to go into great detail. It depends on the ages of the kids, but then be proactive with the things that remain and that you can count on building from.
You've written a new book about your journey and the things you experienced, the wisdom you gained, the things that, you may think, I don't know if that's the way I would have done it again.
Yeah, exactly.
All those things, called Going Solo. And I think it is such a phenomenal resource, because we do have families going through this. And one of the things I know that I've seen in ministry, and as I talk with our staff at the home church at which I serve, we're seeing something that we're calling, and we've seen referred to in media as the walk-away wife, which is a kind of a modern phenomenon. It's something that we haven't seen a lot of in the past. We're seeing more of it today. So What are some of the things you've encountered as you've walked this journey? Because, a lot of times, stereotypically, we have thought of, well, the dad leaving the family and mom being the one remaining behind. What have you found in your season of this and kind of that awareness of, wow, I know there has got to be a certain level it's been a bit isolating, but at the same time, have you met other guys going through the same thing? How common are you seeing this being now today?
Well, I know that, still in our society that by and large, the largest segment of the divorced crowd are women that are left at home with their kids. But like you referenced, the fastest growth, I guess it's not the right word, is the fact that the moms are walking away. And it is an interesting phenomenon. I'm not sure that, I know the answers to that, but I will say that what you hit on related to the church is probably the most significant thing that I experienced and what has driven me to start what I started. And that is that when you go through divorce, and I would say even if you go through a death of a spouse, you feel completely isolated. You feel completely forgotten. One of the most significant feelings that I encountered, that I know a lot of people, single parents, encounter just because I lead groups now of this, is they feel like there's nowhere they fit in. So if you look at just the statistics, 1 in 3 homes, according to the U.S. Census right now in America, are single-parented homes. That's over 30% of the homes in America are single-parented. And another statistic that was run, I think it was by Pew Research, said that 67% of single parents don't attend church. And the number 1 and 2 reasons are they don't feel like they belong and they feel judged. And so I think that is a significant, and it's what's driven me to start Solo Parent Society, is what I longed for was community. And what I was very aware of was that I didn't fit in the church community anymore. I was, on the surface welcomed and said, yeah, we're not casting you aside, but it's like one of these things is not like the other. You walk into church with my 3 girls and I just feel the weight of everybody going, I wonder what the story is there. I've never seen mom there. I wonder who made the mistake. I wonder what the story is associated. And so there's this really crazy feeling of just not fitting in and not belonging. So unfortunately, to answer your question in a very long way, I didn't find a lot of other single parents. There was no assembly of people to walk together with. And so that's a very isolating and lonely place to be.
So based on that experience, what do you think would have been helpful in that season? What would have been, to borrow your phrase, what would have been much more proactive for a church community to have had in place? I think sometimes we don't build it in because we're thinking, well, if we can just get marriages healthy, then, perhaps this won't even be an eventuality of something that we would need. So how can churches better prepare, be better ready for this?
Well, I think the thing is that, I don't think it's the churches that don't care about single parents. I think they just don't know how to make the first step, because it is a very awkward situation. Churches need to first get over the fact that by embracing single parents, you are not embracing divorce. You are embracing people that are broken, in need of a savior, and I would offer probably in a better place to receive the care of God as our Father than people that have it all together. The one thing that's very common about single parents is that the bottom drops out and the roles that you used to play and the groups you used to fit in are all gone. And so you're left with this kind of blank slate. And so God does, for me, and that's what my whole book is about, is the transformation that happened in my life. It was the best thing to ever happen to me going through this season. But to talk directly to the churches, I think it's first of all saying you don't have to fix single parents. It's not our job to fix people. It's our job to wrap our arms around these communities and say, as you walk through this journey, we will be here with you. I mean, that's what the 23rd Psalm, where it talks about the valley of the shadow of death. It doesn't say, thanks God for rescuing me out of the valley of the shadow of death. It says, you are with me. I think that's the role of the church. And so the first steps that churches can take is to, and that's why I created the resources with Solo Parent Society, is to create an easy on-ramp to say, look, if we just do this simple step, we'll attract people. And just as a kind of a proof of concept, we did this at our church here in Nashville. And within a week of offering the Solo Parent Society group, we were at full capacity. And it was never mentioned from the pulpit. And here's another interesting fact. 30% of the people that came didn't actually attend the church. The word of mouth spread so fast among the single parent community that they just longed to plug in. And the groups that we run and that we're offering now to other churches are not teaching classes. They're not fixing single parents. They're basically saying, let's allow you guys to find a place to come together and process through the things you're going through together and watch God work in the midst of that.
We'll be right back with our conversation with Robert Beeson and his experience as a single dad. But first, let's take just a minute to learn about how we can touch the future and change the world when we partner with Compassion International. It only costs a little over $1 a day. It's super easy to do, and it can create the kind of change that completely transforms a community. Hi, I'm Julie Lyles Carr, host of the Modern Motherhood Podcast from AllMomDoes, and we've got a future-changing goal. My family sponsors a little boy through Compassion International, and there are 2 children in the remote region where he lives who also need sponsors. I want to invite you to help change the future for 6-year-old Rachel or for 9-year-old Fahadi. You can provide medical care, education, spiritual care, and make the future better for a child in need. Go to compassion.com/allmomdoes and change tomorrow starting today. That's compassion.com/allmomdoes. Now, it sounds like to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like to me with the going solo opportunities and community that you're building, you're not necessarily designating like, well, this is the single moms group and this is the single dads group. I've seen churches in the past make really valiant efforts in trying to be supportive, but it's things like, oh, we're going to do oil changes for all the single moms, as if there aren't any single dads in the group. So,
Right.
So speak to that for us. Is this something, I'm sure that single moms and single dads have different experiences in some ways, but in some ways it would seem to me that a lot of the issues and challenges and things you're trying to tackle would be a little bit more global than just based on if you're a mom or a dad.
Yeah, I think the things that are global are bandwidth. Whether you're a man or a woman, when you are still juggling school schedules, picking kids up from school, extracurricular activities, and forget yourself. Like, you are absolutely consumed with what your responsibilities are, being 2 parents and feeling like less than one. So yeah, I think those situations are common. And what we did with our Solo Parent Society group here is it is a co-ed situation. It's a large group. And so we've created 3 different formats: a large group format, a small group format, and just a between friends format. So people can start these groups in their churches or even in their homes. And the large group format, to speak to what you're saying, it's a co-ed beginning of the group. And then we split into men's groups and women's groups based on gender, because there are some specific things. But here's the interesting thing. There has been amazing healing that has taken place in these groups because women are hearing men speak of brokenness. They're not the enemy. They're not the, us and them. It is, they are experiencing things as well. And the same with the men. When they hear the brokenness in the women, it actually kind of dismantles some of the anger issues that we have towards the opposite sex. And so it's been remarkable. And I think the other thing is we have in the kits, in the guides, the formats, we're not teach this. It's basically, this is a topic and these are the scriptures for this week. Let's share what this means to us. And so it is based on sharing with each other. And we have just found that allows room for the Holy Spirit to actually work and to bring healing and transformation. And it also, it disarms people from feeling like they're being spoken to. I think a lot of times the church has been guilty, and I'll put myself in this category of thinking, oh, there's a problem, let's go fix it. And I don't know that that's the best approach in this situation.
Now, you had even an added layer of complexity because you were in a faith-based industry when all of this went down. So what was the experience of that as well? Because in some ways that would seem like it could be the most comforting thing to already be engaged in a church community, to be actively working in an industry that was providing resources and music and Christian messaging. And yet at the same time, it almost feels like that could be even more isolating. So what was that experience like, being both church and work, in the Christian lane?
Well, I mean, I think it just highlighted the fact that, you're no longer, and I'm not going to say, I had some great friends, but I felt like, am I so damaged that I don't have a place anymore? And frankly, the way I was living in the Christian music industry was not exemplary. I mean, it was not necessarily what God wanted for my life. And I'm not saying that's the way the industry is. I'm saying that I had to learn the hard way. I had started changing my course and started living more like I should. And so when the bottom dropped out, I had some very supportive friends. But by and large, it was just, I think what a lot of single parents feel about the church. In fact, I know this because I hear it in our groups, is you hear the cursory kind of, oh, I'm so sorry. If there's anything I can do, just call me. But then nothing. Here's the thing. I want to take the blame. I don't want to take the weight off the church a little bit in saying that I get it. I get you don't really know what to do. Like, what do we do as a church? And there's starting groups. But the thing that meant the most to me is I had this one youth pastor at the church that we went to call up one day and say, I want the girls to go out with some of our girls in our youth group and get their nails done. And I want you to go do something, go see a movie, whatever, but leave your house for 4 hours because we're going to take from the top to the bottom of your house and clean it for you. That was like the best gift that I received in my entire solo parent season because it was practical. And so I think the church needs to look for little ways to serve single parents. It could be dropping off kids. It could be picking up kids. It could be saying, I'm going to the grocery store. Do you need anything? Because, I heard one person say, I think it was yesterday in an interview that I did, that when your kids go to bed and you're alone, if you're out of milk, if you're out of whatever, you can't do anything. There's no one to stay with your kids. So that's an example of the load that single parents have, and serving them can look like going and picking up that milk. I mean, it seems really small, but when you're a single parent, you panic about the smallest things like, oh my gosh, we're not going to have any cereal tomorrow in this example. And so I had that one example of that church that did something, but unfortunately, that wasn't the dominant voice that was spoken from the church to me.
Now, you also had a unique experience in that you're a dad with 3 girls. So what was surprising to you in navigating the estrogen waters alone?
Well, I was always close to my girls. Even though I had been really ambitious and been in that world, there's a bond between dads and girls. And what I wasn't prepared for was just the amount of drama and how quickly emotions changed. We could all be having a great time together, sitting on the floor eating chocolate ice cream or something ridiculous. And then all of a sudden, within a couple of minutes, they're just at each other's throats because they're wearing the same thing I wore yesterday, or they're planning to wear the same shirt I'm wearing. It was just like, oh my goodness, like, people, this is just a shirt. It's not a, so I don't know that I was completely prepared for the volatility of things, but it was the sweetest time of my life too. I mean, the bond that I have with my daughters now, it's the most precious thing that I have. And had I not gone through this with them, I don't think it would have been nearly as deep as it is.
So do you feel there's a difference? Because, there's the single parent experience you had, which was, if I'm understanding correctly, you were left alone on an island with these 3 girls. Bye-bye. Mom's got to go deal with some addiction issues and out. But there are also those single parents who, yes, in their day-to-day when they have their kids, they're single parenting, but they're also navigating those choppy, dangerous waters of the ex-spouse still being very involved and trying to co-parent with that person. So speak to those differences, because it seems like to me those are kind of 2 pretty distinct lanes in single parenting that require some different skills.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And had I not started this group and kind of understood the dynamics of all these different families, not every story is like mine, I don't know that I would have had this observation. But you're exactly right. There's the thing about divorce or even death, the solo season, is that the way we get there looks different. But I define the idea of single parenting being different than solo parenting in that solo parenting is a condition. It's not just a status. It's a condition that we have to process through issues in our lives that are difficult, but with the right perspective, I think can be really empowering. And so there are differences. The things that I had to deal with, and as far as like being on an island and just everything is me, and trying to defend that island in court. And I mean, it was messy. That is a different set of problems than people that are co-parenting successfully. I'm not going to say that it's worse or better. It's just different, because the people that are co-parenting have to deal with 2 different cultures and 2 different houses and kids going between those cultures. And does the other parent, Are they disciplining enough, or are they too lenient? And so there are challenges in both. And so I think maybe that's why the church at large hasn't really engaged, because it's like, well, where do you fix? How do you? And that's why our approach is not that. This is more about like, we're going to be here. There's not a right answer, but I can be here with you. And I believe that God is powerful enough to show up and to show the answers, because you're right. There are many facets to how we get to the place of being a solo parent.
Speak to the issue of somehow acknowledging the hurt and the things that went down that caused the divorce of a marriage, and yet at the same time trying to be cautious to honor your child's other parent. Because I think sometimes kids can walk away, even if it's not a message that's spoken, but, hey, I, as your parent, reject half of what made you, I'm done with that. So how do we make sure we're still walking in honor with a fellow human being, even when it becomes evident that we just can't live together anymore and can't do this life thing in the same way we've been doing?
It's hard. I mean, that's a really difficult thing. I have a podcast and I interviewed someone so much smarter than me, Dr. John Sherbin. He's one of like Dr. Phil's lead advisors. And he wrote a book called Collateral Damage, in which he interviewed 10,000 parents and kids of divorce and compiled all the information into his book. And we were talking about this very thing, like how do we honor, how do we express ourselves, and how do we connect? And one of the things that he said was remarkable about his study is that the kids that have gone through divorce have felt that they have lost their childhood, not just lost their parents, but lost their childhood, because they're forced to grow up and deal with things so much more complex. And so in our discussion, we were talking about how important it is to deal with the hurt that's there, but to be very careful and guarded about exactly what you said, not putting the other spouse down, because, couples divorce, parents never divorce. Parents are always parents. And so 50% of your child, no matter what the status of the relationship between you and your ex-spouse is, they will always be a parent. And so I was careful, and I wasn't always successful. Let me just say that from the beginning. And I know that any listeners out there that are single parents know that like it's one step forward, two steps back. Or vice versa. It's difficult. But I tried to honor my girl's mom just by the way I would talk. I was careful not to ridicule or to make fun or belittle or even let anger out. And I think one of the things, to kind of go back to what we talked about in the earlier part of this conversation, was to be proactive. And what I mean by that is we prayed every night for her, for my ex. And if you do things that are deliberate like that, it kind of reframes the way you look at things. And so it helps in the communication with our kids. And I think equal to being deliberate about how we communicate with our kids to not defame the other parent is to find another touch point. You have to find someone that you can let this out with, because when you're dealing with all this anger and this frustration, I can't believe she or I can't believe he did whatever, you have to let it out. It's just, it would be really important to make sure that you do that before you have any reflection of whatever happened with your kids.
So I know that today you are remarried and you have 3 stepsons now added to your family. So you guys are really the Brady Bunch, really, if I do the math correctly.
Yep.
So what was that path to remarriage like for you and your girls? Because it's not just you getting remarried, it's everybody getting remarried. So what was that like?
I think I'm so glad you brought this up, and we could do a whole episode on this. But I think in dating as a single parent, you have to be very aware of the fact that it is not just you. And a lot of people have in the book, I talk about the myth of starting again. There's no such thing as starting again. Like, that train has already left the station. You are not able to start again. And so we need to start framing the way we look at dating potentially as basically your train has already left the track. At best, you can try to find someone their train is also on the track. And the most important thing is direction. Like, where are we going in life and what do we want out of life? Not just, am I attracted? Do they make me happy? Do I, whatever. That's fine. But when you're talking about bringing your kids along with somebody else, whether they have kids or not, it's most important to figure out what they want out of life or what direction the other person that you're interested in is going, and maturity level and what they're able to deal with. Because if you end up coming together and becoming a couple, you're then blending a whole bunch of culture. And it's difficult by itself. But if you are basing your relationship with this person that you're bringing into your life just on your relationship with them and not the greater good, you're asking for trouble. And that's why the statistics are so alarming, even worse divorce rates in second marriages, because I feel like you're not prepared to go into it. And let me say this really clearly. My daughters weren't real excited about sharing me. So I'm not talking about just making them happy and giving them the voting right on like, you can date her or you can't date her. It's more about considering their feelings, considering the long-term effects of what you're about to do. And I would also say that you shouldn't even think about dating until you're okay being alone. And that's really harsh to say because we're made for community. But until we've had time to heal, I just think that dating too quickly can delay the process of healing and actually being ready to be in a relationship.
I had an opportunity to interview Sam Kelly, who's a radio host in the Pacific Northwest, and she went through a first marriage that ended very badly, and that's one of the things that she talked about that I thought was such wisdom was that she said, I needed to really make sure that I was good, the things I needed to learn, even though there were a lot of things that happened with her previous spouse that had been very much on him. But she said, I had things I needed to learn and be okay with and navigate before I was in any way ready to re-enter. And to get too desperate for that connection could have been really disastrous for the next marriage that she now has that's very vibrant and healthy. So tell us about the process of writing the book and where people can find it, all the things going solo.
Sure. So I frame it like this. Like I see going solo as like going to a foreign country. When you go to a foreign country, you want to get a guidebook from somebody that's been there. And so I set out during my solo years, and I didn't know it was going to become a book. I was actually starting to blog and to vlog, and it was more about I want to just kind of write down the things that I'm experiencing, not just the things that I'm doing well, but the things that like, that's not such a good idea. I shouldn't have done that. And so I just kind of assembled all these things over the 8 years of being a single dad in hopes that it would be not only a guidebook for practical tips of how to navigate this season, and not just a guidebook in that sense, but the most important thing that happened to me was the transformation that happened in my walk with God and understanding the fatherhood of God and the intimate care that he has for us. I didn't even come close to understanding that until everything fell apart. And so the process was interesting. I'm not a writer by trade. I mean, I'm a music guy. Like it was kind of like me, an author. I remember telling friends, they're like, "What? You're writing a book? What? That's crazy."
Thanks.
Anyway, but I'm excited. I mean, it was a great process, and I have a great relationship with folks on the family who are my publishers and have been so supportive of what I'm doing, and as well as kind of focusing on the Solo Parent Society, which is where you can find information about the book, as well as these groups that I've talked about. We have group kits for people to start these solo parent groups in their churches or in their homes, and that's all there, as well as my podcast and the book and that kind of thing. My goal is really to empower and equip and unify single parents and to help the church. I'm not the answer. Solo Parent Society isn't the answer. God is the answer, I think, through the local church. And so if I can be a catalyst to point the focus to single parents and what they're going through and to equip the churches on how to meet those needs, and I feel like it's a life well spent.
Well, thank you for utilizing and really investing the difficult season with its blessings and with all of its lessons that you went through and paying it forward and helping equip churches to be better at this thing and helping parents to fly well in the solo lane. Well, Robert Beeson, thank you so much for being with us today. And we just celebrate the release of this book with you, Going Solo. And thanks so much for all that you're doing to invest in the lives of parents.
Oh, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
You can find out more about Robert Beeson and his new book, Going Solo. Stay in touch with him via Twitter. You can find him there under Robert Beeson, which is Robert and then Beeson, Beeson. I'd love to stay in touch with you too through all the socials, and at my website you can find me, Julie Lyles Carr. That's Julie and then Lyles, Lyles Carr, at Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all the places, and my website. And I'd love for you to check out my book, Raising an Original. Hey, Let's give a big hand to Donna Tody. She is our amazing producer, and to Rebecca Beckett, our fantastic content coordinator. They are the ones who help make sure this thing hits the airwaves every single week. And you also want to make sure that you have bookmarked AllMomDoes.com and looked for AllMomDoes on the socials. It is such a fantastic resource for everything in your parenting journey as a wife, mom, boss mom, all the things. Don't miss out on All Mom Does. Coming up next week, I don't know about y'all, but how big a role does money play in your marriage? I mean, if we could get really real, have there been some deep conversations regarding some spending habits and some different choices that are needing to be made about what to spend on the home and what kind of school and what kind of car and all the things that you're dealing with? Well, I am so excited to welcome next week Chuck Bentley. You're going to just adore him. He has some really incredible things to teach us about finance, family, marriage, all of it, and how it all intersects. We'll see you next time on the Modern Motherhood Podcast.